Hello, I'm David Bowman, the tutoring coordinator for the Three Rivers Education Foundation Literacy Initiative. I'm going to share with you the results of the fall 2017 tutoring, basically how well did we do last semester, and I'm also going to share with you something very interesting that we found out about the effect of tutoring on students. So first, let's take a look at the students that we had. As we've seen in prior semesters, the majority of students come to us from that first through fourth grade level. Some kindergarten also, and then kind of a diminishing number of students at the high school level. But that's the majority of our students. So we had 2,590 students who took the pretest or basically started the tutoring program. Of that, 92% completed the program. They got through and took a post test. And of that number, 1,950 or 82% had what we call a valid score, which means pre and post test, obviously, and sufficient number of hours of tutoring and no rush flags on the post assessment. So as we look at the results in the next few graphs, we're specifically talking about those students that have valid scores. Now, what we're looking at here is average grade level gain in reading per grade level. So we start with kindergarten. We see that there's only a zero point 0.6 grade level gain. You might think, well, that's not very much. But the fact is, kindergarten students really can't be very far behind. Now, what we don't see here is that by the post test, 100% of all kindergarten students made or exceeded grade level expectations. So that's very good. Doesn't look like much growth, but it's enough for 100% to reach or exceed grade level. And then when we look at the first through fifth grade, we see on average that those students made a 1.1 grade level gain. And that's very similar to what we've seen in prior semesters. Now, as many of you know, we reduced the maximum number of hours for those students from 32 to 24. When I had taken a look at prior data, I looked at average growth according to how much time students received tutoring, how many hours. And what it looked like was that at 24, growth kind of peaked out at that point. It kind of leveled out. And what we think was happening is that at some point, kids, they've kind of learned all they can learn in that short time frame, and now they need time to practice and use those skills. Then their brains need time to develop the mental pathways to incorporate them. They've got to process them. So growth will again begin to accelerate, but first they need that time to actually use some of those skills. And 24 hours seems to be at the point where, on average, students have kind of gotten the most that we can give them during a single semester. So we limited it. We limited the hours to 24, and as a result, what we see is that even though we did that, the average results are pretty much exactly the same as what we have seen in the past. So at the 6 to 8 grade level, we had on average students making a 1.7 grade level gain in reading, and at the high school a whopping 4.3 grade level gain. Now, in general, those students were pretty far behind in their reading ability, 2, 3, 4, 5 years behind. So even though not a lot of those students will make the grade level, they made huge gains in their reading ability. That's what this one shows us here. Now, here we're looking at kindergarten through eighth grade. The blue bars represent the students' reading ability, grade level reading ability at the pre-test, and then the maroon bars are showing their grade level reading at the post-test. And so that's where we see all of those gains. And you'll see that kindergarten, for example, averaged a 0.3 at the end, which is a little bit above grade level, and for each of those grades up through eighth. Now you might think, well, why don't we have all of the kids on grade level? But the fact of the matter is, for a lot of students, when they start with this, they're pretty far behind, and it's just too big of a jump to make within that short time frame that we have with them. So for example, take a look at fourth grade. At the pre-test, students were reading on average at the second grade level. So to make grade level, students would have to make, on average, 2 full years of growth, which is an awful lot of growth to make in a very short amount of time. Well, students made in fourth grade a 1.2 grade level gain on average, and that's a lot of gain. It just wasn't enough gain for a lot of those students to actually make it all the way up to grade level. Well, when we evaluate the quality of the program, and when we report to our federal program officers, we report on how much gain did students make. And the gains that we're seeing here are very strong and very meaningful. So we're quite satisfied with what we're seeing here as far as grade level gains. Um, Actually, these gains are very strong, and in great part that's because of the work that you're doing to help kids fill in these fundamental skills, looking at all 6 areas, so that students can then have the background they need in order to acquire the higher level skills. These kids will get to grade level. They will, because of the work that you're doing with them now in tutoring. When we started at the pretest, about 2 or 3% of students actually started with this already on grade level. And at the end, we had about 32, 34% on grade level. Well, that's only one way to look at these results. What I like to look at is how much gain occurred during that time. And the gains are very, very good. So now, as promised, something very exciting. One of the things that I did is I worked with 4 districts to look at their state assessment results. And I looked at 2 groups of students. Well, all 3rd grade students who did not receive tutoring. And then I looked at the scores for students in tutors' classrooms, for those tutors who are classroom teachers. And I compared them against the scores for students who are not in tutors' classrooms. So non-tutored students, 3rd grade, if the classroom teacher was a tutor or the classroom teacher was not a tutor. And here's what we found out. In each of these 4 districts we looked at, the students whose classroom teacher is a tutor, on average, did better on the state assessment than students whose classroom teacher was not a tutor. So looking at this graph, the bottom number represents the average English language arts placement for students whose classroom teacher was not a tutor. So that's the 1.92, 2.73, 1.83, and so on. So that's average placement for kids whose students were not tutors. The upper number, 2.57, 3.39, and so forth, that's the average placement for students whose classroom teacher was a tutor during the last school year. So in each district that we looked at, what we found is that students in tutors' classrooms outperform students in non-tutors classrooms. We didn't really design this tutoring model to be professional development for classroom teachers. We pushed out resources and training and support and monitoring and all of these things to help the kids in the tutoring groups. But what we find from this is all of those skills and resources and the ways that we encourage you to think about instruction and skills, that's carrying over to what you're doing in the classroom. And as a result, on average, your students in classrooms are doing better on their state assessment results than teachers who have not participated in tutoring. Of all of the things that we've looked at and all the ways that we have looked at data around this tutoring program, this is unquestionably the most important finding. Think about this. We have a huge geographic area with some 90,000 school-age kids in it. Only a very small percentage of those students ever get involved in tutoring. So how do we affect the instruction for all of those other kids? How do we help them? And as it turns out, the work that you're doing as tutors is carrying over to the work that you do as classroom teachers. And that's how we affect more than just these few kids in tutoring, and we end up improving educational outcomes for all of the students in your schools. So this is without a doubt very, very powerful, and it shows that the attention and the time and the consideration that you're putting into tutoring is also helping the students in your classroom. So fantastic, and thank you very much for that. So a couple other things as we look at the data from last semester, it's still true. Every student in your tutoring group needs to have some instruction in every component every week. So every student, every week, every component. That still is the key to maximizing student growth. And then also to always keep thinking about the current students that you have now. What are their interests? What are their reading skills? What are their next steps in reading? What are the activities that are going to be most engaging to them? Um, we often think about, having been a teacher, I know how it is, right? Here are some things that I did previously and they worked, so I'm going to use them again. Well, I would encourage you to always think about the students that you have right now. Maybe what you did before will be great. Maybe the kids you have now need something a little bit different. So always think about the students that you have now, their learning needs, their abilities, their next steps, their interests, the activities that'll be most engaging to the students you have now. So to assist with this, we've got a couple of new resources for you, and maybe you've had a chance to take a look at them already. There is that whole set of documents on the tutoring website resources page, what you need to know about phonics, what you need to know about phonemic awareness in all 6 areas. Basically, it's everything, what is the skill? What are all the sub skills that students need to learn? What are the strategies that work? What are the activities that align with those strategies? And what doesn't work? So if you've got some time, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at those. And then I finally produced the last of the instructional videos. The last one I finished was the vocabulary one, finished it over the summer. So, quick and dirty, 8 to 12 minutes. Here's what we know about instruction for that particular area. So all 6 of those are now available over on the tutoring website as well. Ultimately, though, the purpose of this video is to say thank you. We've looked at the results now for the fall 17 semester, and the results are very strong and very good. So that is because of the work that you are doing, and we appreciate it very much, that the time and the effort and the thinking and the passion that you're putting into helping these kids learn to read and improve their reading abilities. So on behalf of all of us here at the Three Rivers Education Foundation, and certainly on behalf of the students that you're working with, a very heartfelt thank you for being a reading tutor with the Three Rivers Education Foundation Literacy Initiative. Have a great day.